Welcome to Japan Seikatsu. I'm Ian, and I would like to speak to you today about the online JET interview. As many of you are aware, in many regions, the JET program this year will be conducting their interviews online through Zoom or other platforms. While this doesn't change a lot of the core principles of a successful JET interview, and I've done a video sharing my tips on passing the JET interview, I will share a link down below. We do need to adjust our tactics to this new reality. So today I'd like to share 7 tips to help you pass the online JET interview. As background, I was a JET. I interviewed in 2010 in Washington, D.C. I was on the program for 3 years in Shikoku. I now work for a Japanese company here in the UK, and I am a marketing and communication strategist. So I work with Zoom every day. I've done lots of webinars and conferences and meetings and interviews through Zoom. So I would like to share some of the tips from both the JET program, but also my current profession. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, to get started, I want to share with you 7 tips to help your JET online interview be a success. I will be looking down. I have my notes. I want to make sure that I get all of this information across to you and don't forget any of it. So please excuse me while I look down. But let me start. Tip number 1 is to make sure that you prepare and that you practice. So my advice always with interviews is practice, practice, practice. That does not change in this instance. But you want to bring a lot of that practice online. If you can find a friend or a colleague or a sibling, a teacher, to practice the interview with over Zoom or the specific platform. If you know what platform it is that will be used, that will be a big benefit. If you can record this, that's even more helpful. A lot of the time, we don't notice ourselves mistakes that we're making, or maybe we're speaking too quickly, maybe we're not enunciating, maybe we're too quiet, maybe we're using or a lot. When you listen to a recording of yourself, you will quickly be able to catch that and then adjust and improve. So, as with any interview, you want to make sure that you practice, and you want to make sure that you're listening for the audio quality. Do you have an appropriate mic? But also the video quality. Do you have an appropriate camera? If not, maybe that's something to look at getting fixed. Now, part of this prepare and practice is also to ensure that you always have a backup. So you want to make sure that your battery is fully charged. You want to make sure that if you're planning to do the interview on a computer and for whatever reason your computer doesn't work, you have another computer to go to, or you have another, an iPad to jump to. You always want to have a plan B, so that if Murphy's Law jumps in, it's not going to be a deal breaker for you. Notifications, of course, make sure that your phones are on silent. Make sure that your notifications on your computer are turned off. You can play around with this. You could create a guest account, sign into the guest account, conduct the interview through that. This should all be a part of your practice. To make sure that you don't have any distractions during the actual interview. You also want to, if you're using Wi-Fi and you know that there's other family members or housemates that are using the internet, maybe ask them for this particular time to hold off using the internet so that you are comfortable that you have a secure connection. Okay, number 2, and this is really quite important, is lighting. It's bad lighting really can make you look not very professional, where great lighting can be magical. So the best lighting is natural lighting, where you would be sitting in front of a window, for example, with the sun coming in. That usually looks the best, but with natural lighting, we don't control it. We don't control the weather. So you want to position yourself for success. And the quickest way to do that is to have the lighting source coming directly at you. You can play with lamps in your house, and part of your, as I was speaking earlier about practicing, see which angle when you place these lights looks the best. If you want, you could make an investment into an LED ring light. That usually would be a big help. They're quite reasonably priced. And if you think about the money that you're saving from not having to go to the physical interview, it's well worth it. I drove several hours round trip. I think I ate out. My parking cost right there is the cost of an LED ring light. So consider that, and make sure that your lighting looks good. That's an easy win that will help make you look professional. Tip number 3 is the camera position. It does not look good if your camera is quite low, looking up at your face. You want to have the camera roughly about eye level, and you want to make sure that it's stable, so it's not on your lap, but rather ideally your computer, and it's sitting atop of some books if you need, to make sure that it's roughly about eye level. That comes across most professional. As I was saying earlier, make sure it's a flat surface as well. You don't want it shaking and causing anybody that is doing the interview with you to get dizzy. Number 4 is your background, and you want a clean, simple, minimalist background. You don't want a whole lot of clutter. You most definitely want a professional background. You don't want any pets jumping in. You don't want a sleeping roommate in the background. You don't want anything that will distract your audience, right? You're trying to deliver a message, and you don't want anything that's going to distract from that message. So make sure you think ahead and you've got your background curated as you would like it curated. Okay, tip number 5 is to dress professionally. This is very basic advice, but it remains even with a Zoom interview. You don't want to have your PJs on from the waist down. You don't want to have your jeans on. Again, Murphy's Law. I mean, if during the JET interview they ask you to teach a brief lesson on a certain topic, or to do Simon Says, and you need to stand up or something, and you have jeans on or PJs on, it'll be game over right there. But also there's a mental component. When you're dressed well, you're dressed for success, head to toe. You feel like you're going to bring your A game, and so you want to bring that kind of mental boost with you by dressing professionally and well. So very basic advice, but I would not let the fact that this may be a Zoom interview change that. Okay, tip number 6 is always important, but even more important now, and that is to speak slowly and clearly. Keep in mind that often when you're doing a JET interview, 1 or 2, possibly all of them, but often at least one of the interviewees will be Japanese, so English is a second language. And if you're not being clearly understood, then your message isn't getting across. Now, with Zoom, it's even easier to miscommunicate or to speak over somebody. So you want to be extra careful, and remember that some of your audience, English will be a second language. So speak slowly, speak clearly. In Japanese culture, there's a longer pause after finishing what you'd like to say, and so you wanna respect that, and it'll also help you in a Zoom interview not accidentally speak over somebody else. Again, going back to my earlier tips, this is why you want to practice, record, practice with a friend to make sure that your audio and your visual is very, very good. That's quite important here. In a normal interview, there's a lot of nonverbal cues that are going to be that are just picked up subconsciously. Some of that is lost with this technology. Your goal is to minimize how much of that is lost. And finally, eye contact is a bit tricky. In a normal face-to-face interaction, you you make eye contact. You're not staring at the person the whole time in the eyes, right? That would be awkward. During the interview, when you're speaking, you want to make sure you're speaking to the camera. That really gives the sense of eye contact. Now, when others are speaking, if you're just looking at the camera, you can't see their faces, which is not ideal. So usually the camera is right above center part of your screen. What I would do is I would gaze as we do naturally when we're having a conversation. So you're making eye contact with the camera, but then you're also looking down slightly to look at the person that's asking you questions, and then I would again look up at the camera, and then I would look down again, so that you're constantly able to keep their faces within your gaze while still making eye contact by looking up at the camera. I think this is the best way to kind of have a natural feel during the interview, which is quite important. Those are the 7 tips. I hope they're quite helpful for you. Again, I've done an interview, a JET program interview YouTube video, and I have a link down below, so please do check that out. This interview will be a great way to demonstrate to the JET program that the basics of an online interview, of video communication, you have down. And that is going to be a critical asset, I think, in today's world with teaching, considering everything that's going on. The executing this interview well will not only hopefully help you get the job, but also I think the ability to have good tech know-how is critical. Oftentimes the JETs are kind of the informal IT department because they're young and they're tech savvy. And so if you can bring a lot of that know-how to the program, that's a real asset that I think they'll appreciate. One more thing that I just remembered. I would not sit there with a cup of coffee or a tea. In Japan, I think that's taken as too casual. Even outside of Japan during an interview, I think a lot of people would view that as too casual. So if you get thirsty, maybe you've got a bottle of water or a cup of water there. But ideally for this interview, I would skip the drinking the coffee. I just don't think it looks very professional, right? You don't want to be sitting there eating a cheeseburger while you're doing an interview. So final food for thought. But having said that, I wish all of you the best. The JET program is going to be quite competitive this year, so please do as much preparation as possible. And I'm thinking of you. As always, we want to build this channel up as much as possible to help the community, so please be sure to subscribe and like. Japan Seikatsu is about building a community of people that are passionate about Japan. Well, with that, thank you very much, and best of luck to all of you. Take care.